So, today we're going to be talking about writing as a career. And when I say career, I mean both part-time and full-time. Because of the fact that it can still be a career path, regardless of whether you choose full-time or part-time work. Part-time is obviously going to be a little bit more realistic just because of the fact that and I don't mean realistic to discourage you, I just mean realistic because a lot of people don't want to just be a writer. They want to do other things with their life as well. And not that you shouldn't. If you want to be a writer full time, I would say absolutely go for it and you can do it. And congratulations, I hope you get there. But at the same time, I realize that a lot of people write because they enjoy it, not necessarily because they want it to be their career. So I'm going to talk about both part-time and full-time. Now, let me write this down. Irregardless of whichever route you choose, it is good to keep in mind the fact that at the beginning, whether you want to be full-time or part-time, you will need some other source of income. This is why a lot of people become a part-time writer, is because of the fact that they find something else they love along the way while they're trying to become a full-time writer and decide they want to do both. However, if you do want to become a full-time writer, you're still going to need some sort of income in the beginning because of the fact that, unfortunately, if you want to do traditional publishing, it takes a long time to get traditionally published. Acceptance and failure and rejections and rewrite this whole thing and maybe we'll accept you. It's a lot of work. Unfortunately, trying to get an agent and a traditional publisher is not easy by any stretch of the imagination, which is why a lot of people go part-time, because of the fact that once they do finally get that big break, they have found something else that they love instead of just writing. And there's nothing wrong with that. Again, either is great. But even if you want to go full-time, have a part-time day job or night job, however it works for you, until you can become a full-time author. I would highly recommend not quitting your day job just because you get a contract. Just because you get a contract with a traditional publisher does not mean that you'll be able to come full-time, unfortunately. For example, sorry, I'm saying a lot today. I'm a little tired. For example, the author of Hunger Games, Suzanne Collins, I believe is her name, if I remember correctly, she was not a full-time author at first. She was part-time. She wrote an entire, I think it was 12-book series before she published The Hunger Games and became a full-time author. That was secondary. And even then, becoming a full-time author, she hasn't written a book in years, and she's just been able to be a quote-unquote full-time author living off the movie rights and the merchandise and the etc. But she didn't start that way, right? She took 10 years making a 10 to 12, I think it might be even 12, book series and didn't get hardly any money off of it. You know, pennies, you know, maybe a little bit, kind of, sort of. However, then she published Hunger Games, and now she can't get enough of money. People are constantly being like, write in the Hunger Games thing, give us more merchandise, theme park. I don't know, I could see that coming eventually. As terrifying as that is. But the point being that you need some sort of day job before then, because even if you do get published, the likelihood that you're going to springboard off into full-time author, writing all the time, and making enough money that you can write all the time is not guaranteed once you get that publishing contract. So please keep in mind, when you get your publishing contract in the future, don't just immediately quit your day job. Unless you immediately are a bestseller overnight. But that's a different story. That's an exception to this rule. Generally, I would say keep your day job until you know that you're making enough money that you can live off of this, and that your publishers are good enough and they're going to work with you that you can sustain yourself off of that. Next, we're going to talk about magazines and anthologies. Now, both of these are super helpful and important. The reason why is because if you do want to become a full-time author, people do tend to take you a lot more seriously the more publications you have, and that includes short story publications. That's why I encourage you highly to enter into the short story writing contest we have here, not because you can get published off of it, sadly, but rather because I always give feedback. And so do the other judges. So you can learn how to be better and better and better at writing short stories, and you can then start submitting your short stories. You can even start submitting short stories now as a teenager to anthologies and magazines. Now, if you're having any trouble finding magazines or anthologies that accept A, teens, and B, just accept short story submissions in general, I can help you. There are tons of resources that I have that can help you find places to submit. I would highly recommend submitting to magazines and anthologies. Even if you get like 1,000 rejection letters, if you get even 5 accepted, that you're going to be ahead of the kids your age, just in general. Whether you want to be part-time or full-time, this is going to be super helpful when you're querying, because to say, hey, I was published in this magazine like 17 times, that's going to be really impressive. Or, hey, alternatively, I was published in 5 different anthologies. That's impressive too. Or alternatively, you can also enter into really prestigious contests for young writers, and that's very impressive too. When people see, oh, you've got all these awards from these fancy, prestigious writing competitions, all of a sudden publishers go, maybe we should consider you a little bit more likely. It gives you, and it also just gives you practice in general, working with the submission process, with an editor, with a publisher, etc. And the nice part is some of these magazines and anthologies actually pay you, which is nice. A good bonus. All right. Next. Unfortunately, the next thing that we're going to talk about is time. Now, as I said before, it's going to take time. It's going to take time to find the perfect agent. It's going to take time to find the perfect publisher. It's going to take time to get your book published after you find the publisher. You will get an advance of a certain amount of money if you get an agent or a publisher, and after that advance, they will then take about a year producing your book. That's why a lot of people say, while you're waiting for your first book to get published, start writing your second book, because it takes that much time, not only to find someone, but then to get it out there and get it published. That way you're ahead of the game. It's a lot. So it takes a lot of time, not only to query, but also it takes a lot of time even if you are indie publishing. I want to talk a little bit about indie publishing because of the fact that that is very much still a viable thing. If you want to do indie publishing as a part-time career, I'd say 100% go for it. It is a lot easier as a part-time career because it's a lot less of a commitment as a part-time career. And it's still going to take time though, because except this time it's going to take time and parentheses money. Because if you're going the independent route, unlike the traditional route, they aren't going to pay everything for you. You have to pay for yourself. And I would recommend it, actually. A lot of people say, oh, no one cares if your cover's cool. No one cares if you have an editor. Actually, they do. They really care. So if you're going to go indie, make sure that you save up the money and take the time to make it really, really good. Beyond that, it's also going to take time to start marketing. I would highly recommend start marketing your book about 3 months before it's supposed to come out. And when I say marketing, I mean Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever your age group is, market towards that. So if you're marketing towards adults, Facebook. If you're marketing towards young adults and teens, TikTok. If you're marketing towards women and teens and young adult, then I would say Instagram. Because for some reason there are a lot of adult women on Instagram. Nothing wrong with that. It's just for some reason there are a lot more adult women than adult men on Instagram. So if your market is primarily women or young adults, I would say Instagram as well. But keeping that in mind, it's going to take time. And if you want it to be successful in particular, it's going to take a lot of time, unfortunately. So don't be discouraged if you're getting dozens and dozens of rejection letters from agents. Don't be discouraged if you're trying super hard to market your book independently on Instagram and you're posting, every day and you're doing your best and you're getting maybe 27 likes. That's okay. You have to start somewhere. If you don't start, you'll never get to the big leagues. So you got to be patient with yourself. All right. Next. I'm missing my glasses today, so I actually am having a hard time reading. Now, this might sound funny, but it works well for both indie and traditional authors. So irregardless of which one you want to be, you need to establish yourself in the community, kind of like I was just talking about. It's going to take time to do this, but you also need to establish yourself. If you're going traditional, they will take you so much more seriously if you already have a writing account with 1,000 or more followers. If you say, hey, I have 1,000 followers who all love my content talking about my book, they'll be like, that's 1,000 people who probably will buy your book. That means if we buy it, we have a guaranteed probably of at least 1,000 sales right off the bat. That's a lot more encouraging for a publisher, right? They're like, because their whole thing is money, right? Like, yes, they want to help you publish your book, but ultimately they want to make money off of your book. It also helps to establish yourself. It is crucial to establish yourself, I'll specify that, with indie publishing, because if you do not establish yourself beforehand, trying to establish yourself after the fact is actually so much harder. Doing a pre-campaign and then here's my book, I published it, and then like keeping it up afterwards is so much easier than like trying to start after you've published. It is really hard. Not completely undoable, but really hard. Now, for the traditional route, it's important to talk about what already established means for this. So like I said, having a Instagram or TikTok or something like that where you have a bunch of followers who all regularly comment on your stuff and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited for your book, is going to make traditional publishers more encouraged because they see you're already established in today's day and age. Funnily enough, it's becoming more and more of a requirement. It hasn't quite become a requirement yet, but it's slowly becoming a requirement of the publishing age because of the fact that they realize it's free. I think if it wasn't free, they wouldn't expect it, but because it's free, they're like, come on, it's free, why not? So they're starting to have this expectation of it. The other thing you need to keep in mind, though, is if you do short stories or like we talked about, anthologies and magazine publications, that will help establish yourself in the author community as I am serious and I am making money off of this already. Now I just need a novel. That's going to definitely help people go, oh, I'm a lot more interested in what you have to say. They're a lot more willing to take a gamble on you, because the saddest part is that they do see it as a gamble. They see it as a gamble because if you don't make money, they don't make money. So they got to look at your stuff and go, I don't know how I feel about that. And then if you say, I've also published it in this many times and been this successful with contests and stuff, they're going to probably go a little bit more like, okay, a little less of a gamble. It's kind of like when you're actually gambling and someone says like, everyone's like, oh yeah, I have such great cards, I have such great cards, but then you actually look at everyone's cards. If you could look at everyone's cards beforehand, even just a peek at their cards, I think you'd feel a little bit more confident gambling, right? And that's the same thing here. They feel a little bit more confident taking the gamble on you if you have an established social media presence, if you have established yourself as a short story writer already, if you have a fan base, if you have high ratings in a small contest platform. Last thing I'm going to say with establishing yourself is if you want to become an indie author, establish yourself social media first. If you want to become a traditional author, I say go for traditional first. And then if you decide to do indie later, that's fine. Hello! But I would highly recommend starting traditionally if you want to go traditional, because if you go independently, unfortunately, there's this terrible expectation. I'm going to just break this down for you, and it's really frustrating for me. The expectation when you go from indie to traditional is that the reason they're picking you up is because you were already successful as an indie author, and already successful in the traditional publishing world means you've sold at least 10,000 copies. So, that is really hard to do as an independent author. really hard. Not impossible, but really hard. The reason why is because you have to already have, like I said, established yourself on social media, be able to have a presence on social media, be able to talk to people about those kinds of things, and be able to promote yourself well. Now, if you can do all those things well and get 10,000 copies sold, then yes, 100%, I would say talk to traditional publishers, because that's a version of establishing yourself. But don't assume that it's going to get you there because you indie publish. A lot of people actually look down on you if you indie publish and sell less than 10,000 copies. It makes me really sad. The reason why is because of the most tragic thing I've ever heard. When I was working as an intern for a traditional publishing company, there was this girl who had, well, woman, but girl, who had published independently on Kindle Vella. It's where you publish just ebook. Not a lot of indie authors do that. A lot of indie authors actually do physical copies and ebook, or just physical copies. But she decided to do just ebook, and she had over 500 readers, which made us go, this could be interesting, this could be good, you know? However, they almost didn't take her because of the fact that they were like, 500 isn't enough. Maybe there's something wrong with her writing. Maybe there's a bigger problem with her writing, and that's why there's not as many people rating it. Instead of seeing it as, she didn't market herself well, or she doesn't have a good social media presence, so that's why no one knows it exists, they assume it's because of the writing, which is false and erroneous and really frustrating. Luckily for her, she did, I believe, get published through Monster Ivy because of the fact that she also had a really good social media presence. It's just she hadn't until a couple months ago, so she'd been like improving her process. If she hadn't had that social media presence, we probably would have said no. Which makes me really upset and sad, because I'm like, oh, but it's so good. So just keep in mind, when working on establishing yourself in the writing community, you've got to decide what you want to do. If you want to become an indie part-time author, that's great. That'll be super easy, because you can just post once a week on your Instagram, go to a couple writing events, and publish your stuff. Totally chill. If you want to become a full-time indie author, just know you're going to have to split your time about half and half. Half writing and half marketing. You are your own marketer, and it's actually going to be less expensive and more effective if you are your own marketer. The only problem is it's going to take time. Well, more effective most of the time. There are some people who have no idea how to market, but basic YouTube videos exist now. So, meanwhile, if you want to be a full-time traditionally published author, make sure to establish yourself a little bit. Create a writing account where you talk about, hey, I'm doing all this cool stuff with my novel. Look at this. Hi. And when they look at it and see, hey, you've published all this stuff and you've done all this stuff, and even if you haven't published short stories or anything like that, and you've just been like advertising your book on social media, that's actually going to be super helpful for them knowing that you have a presence and that they can publish your book, and that you're going to be more successful than you would have been if no one knows who you are. Social media is a great blessing and a curse simultaneously. It can be used to great effect, and it can also damage lots of things, because, well, like I said, if you don't use it correctly, it can do nothing as well. So, next thing that I would say is, if you do plan to be a full-time author, whether it's indie or traditional, I'm going to do indie on one side and traditional on the other. Smiley face. Alright, if you decide to go the independent route, you've got to keep in mind that like I said, about 50% of it is going to be marketing. And yes, this will have to count as part of your full-time job, is marketing. On the bright side, because of the fact that it counts as part of your full-time job, if you do actually make it to be a full-time indie author, you can count any sort of expenses for those kinds of things, like lighting or backdrop stuff or things like that, as tax write-offs. Shh, don't tell them I said that. But that is true. As far as traditional goes, I would say more like 30%, because of the fact that the publishing agency is going to make up the other 20%. So as a result, you have to put less effort into it. Not no effort, but less effort. It's definitely, and it's a lot easier too, because you'll have people on the marketing team at the publishing house that'll say, hey, you should do this, and you go, thanks, and you're able to do it. Unlike with indie, where you have to learn all these techniques yourself. Is it doable? Yes. Is it hard? Also yes. The other thing that you need to take in mind is you need to have a set schedule. So I'm going to do a both column. Both, please. I would recommend having a set schedule. And when I say set schedule, I don't mean you necessarily have to be writing during that time. I mean that should be your writing time. You should have set aside specific writing time. True. However, with your set aside specific writing time in your schedule, also keep in mind that part of your writing time will be easing into your writing time, because most people can't just sit down and go, I will write now, poof. Most of the time it's like, okay, I need to get in the mood for writing. I need to think about what I was last writing. I need to read the last paragraph to figure out where I am. You know, all that stuff. So I would say if you do schedule time, make sure that you try to schedule a good amount of time. Or alternatively, if you don't schedule time, I would highly recommend bringing either something that you can write on, either digitally or physically, so that way you can write in the in-between moments. If you have a moment waiting for a train, you can write for a couple minutes. If you have a moment waiting at the doctor's office, or a couple hours because they're almost always late, then you can write there. If your schedule is too busy to schedule time in blocks, that is what I recommend. Scheduling time in throughout your day and saying, oh, well, I'll have about 10 minutes while I'm waiting for the train. I will write for those 10 minutes. And you'd be surprised how much more you get done when you do that kind of thing. All right, the next thing I would say is word count goals. A lot of people say the deadlines work really well for them, but it depends on the person. So if you're one of those people who's like, deadlines work super well for me, I have to have 50,000 words written by August, go, you can totally do that. But I would highly recommend a word count goal, because most people aren't like that. Some people are. If that's you, great. But most of the time, word count goals are the typical. It's what people go for the most, and it makes things a lot easier. And it also helps you feel more accomplished when you're finished, because of the fact that with a page count goal, you don't know how much you actually wrote, because you might have a ton of dialogue, in which case you have a lot of spacing, right? Because you have to space out the dialogue. Or alternatively, if you have a ton of prose, it might feel like you wrote a ton, but you didn't write as much because it's big blocky chunks of paragraphing. Hello! So it's okay to have a general deadline goal, but word count goals are also very nice and feel a little bit nicer on the brain. Sorry, I don't have my glasses today, so I'm really having a hard time reading. Alright, especially if you are an indie author, so I'm going to say more heavily here, but I'm going to lean it into the both category. Set aside a specific space. So, if you plan on becoming a full-time or part-time indie author, this is going to be crucial, because this space is not only going to be your writing space, but this is going to be your marketing space too. So you need to have a spot. Trust me, as a person who has tried to do more marketing and been like, I don't know where to do this, having a specific spot is really nice, because then you always just go, when I am in this spot, I do marketing, or when I am in this spot, I do marketing and writing, depending on which side of the spectrum you're on. Having that set aside space is going to really help even in the traditional side of things, because of the fact that it feels more like you have to actually work. Which, I know we don't want to think of writing as work, but ultimately if you want to become a full-time author, it's going to become work one day. I'm sorry. It's just part of the process. Everything that was once fun eventually becomes work when it's like, you have a deadline and 20,000 words left. Oh no! That's when it becomes work. But if you have that set-aside space and that set-aside time, that really helps. I know a lot of full-time authors said that even when they were part-time authors, they had a set-aside space. Dan Wells, that was one of my favorite ones on the Writing Excuses podcast. he specifically said that he had a spot in his best friend's basement, I think it was. His best friend had like an extra spot in the basement that he wasn't really using, and he didn't know what to do with the room, and so he was like, can I just like rent out the room, and when I'm there I'm doing writing? And he was like, sure.
Absolutely.
Right? And it was great, but it helped him write more because of the fact that then he didn't have any distractions. Then he knew when he was there it was like office time. It was like this was his workspace. He had to work when he was there. Now, if you alternatively don't have that, because I realize all of you guys are teenagers and don't really have those resources, you can come to the library as your writing time. You can find a certain spot in your bedroom that becomes your writing/marketing space. You can find a certain spot in your yard if it's nice weather to become your marketing/writing space. Honestly, I would say another point is your desk. If you're able to have some sort of desk, that I would highly recommend that become your space, because it is very nice to be able to just have a desk space, and when you're at that desk you're working. It really helps. I don't know if it'll help you guys, but that really helps. And then the last thing that I would say is for both of them, so I'm just going to put it in the middle of all of them. Putting away distractions. This has actually become a hilarious phenomenon to me because of the whole fact that there used to be these really tiny laptops that had nothing else on them except for you could write on Word. That was it. Any other functions and it would die. That was pretty much all it had. And people have actually started going back and making those again so specifically writers can buy them. Why? Because then you can't pull up Instagram if you put your phone in the other room. I do clarify if you put your phone in the other room. But if you put your phone in the other room and just have this little thing, you can't pull up other tabs. You can't get distracted. It's just, it is what it is. You're writing. Now, not everyone works like that. As a person who has ADHD, I have to have music on in the background. I have to have a TV show on in the background. I have to have something on in the background or I'll lose my mind. But putting away distractions can be really helpful for a lot of people. And when I say putting away distractions, I say putting away the things that will make you the most distracted. So if you're ADHD and you need time, something in the background, or if you need music on, that's totally fine. When I say putting away distractions, I mean distractions like, oh no, I'm going to be scrolling on Instagram for 4 hours. Or alternatively, this show is so interesting that I can't take my eyes off of it. I generally recommend, if you have ADHD and like putting a TV show on in the background, pick something that you can kind of ignore, that you're like, oh, I kind of already know what the plot is. For example, for me, I absolutely love crime dramas. And the reason why is because I can put them on in the background and enjoy them, but still be writing or editing or whatever I'm doing full concentration, because of the fact that predictable. They have some twists and turns, but generally, you know, they're going to find person murdered. They're going to solve murder. The in-between is not super important.
So basically a Hallmark movie.
That is true too. Hallmark movies would be a great thing to put on in the background if you are worried about getting distracted, because you know, two people going to meet, two people going to fall in love. Yay. Like, in the middle mush is kind of just mush. Like, it's enjoyable mush, but it's still, you can work through it and not really have to focus on it too hard to figure out the ending. That being said, I would say if you want to be a full-time author, pick what you want to do probably now. The reason why I say probably now is because if you start working towards it now, that is going to severely help you in the future. If you start working towards independent now, I would say start with a Instagram account or a TikTok account and start advertising yourself. And yes, you can do this without showing your face. So if your parents are all like, oh no, don't put yourself on the internet, that's okay. I understand that. You don't have to do it with a face. There are lots of things you can do for faceless marketing. Just know it is slightly harder because of the fact that it does take a lot more technical savvy with the Canva and the this and the fanciness. And yeah, Canva is a great site to do that.
It's awesome. It rocks. If you need help, I got you.
Right? It's good. It's good. It's super cool. Yeah. It just takes a lot of technical work and savvy. So yes.
If you come to Magic Club, I will help.
Fantastic. Gwen knows how to work Canva super well. I also know how to work Canva, but at a much more, what's the word? Intermediate level. But yeah, I would generally say if you're going to go indie, whether part-time or full-time, start now. Because of the fact that that will help get you more followers, more traction, more people interested in your novel. If you're going traditional, I would say start now with short story publications and contests. The more you can enter into contests and publications with your short stories, the more likely it is that you're going to be able to get a traditional contract later on. So I would highly recommend, if you're going indie, establish yourself with socials. And if you're going traditional, establish yourself with short publications. If you are not sure which direction you want to go right now, maybe do both. Especially because when you do short publications, they actually really appreciate it if you give them free marketing. So if you do both, they're going to be extra happy with you. If you're like, guess what? I published in this thing. Guess what? Go buy it. They're going to be like, oh, cool. We got free marketing. I like them. So it puts you in good graces with traditional publishers, but it also helps set you up in case you want to go indie. It helps go both ways. I would highly recommend, if you have to transition though, I would go traditional to indie instead of indie to traditional. Like I said, it's a lot harder. If you go indie to traditional, they really do expect you to sell at least 10,000 copies. And that's definitely not easy. Not impossible, but not easy. So if you're worried about going one way or the other, I'd say start with traditional, and then if you want to switch, you can totally switch. The best part is that once you will generally be locked into a contract for a series, but then once you finish that series, you can go, I'm starting a new series. And because there's so many people who love your book, when you say, hey, guess what? I'm publishing a new series, it won't matter if you're independently published because you're you and they know they like your books. So with traditional, I would say that's a much easier slide that direction, but that doesn't mean you can't go from indie to traditional. It just means it's going to be a little bit harder. All right. As far as that goes, I'm going to erase this. Long story short, if you have any questions about traditional or independently publishing / full-time writing careers, please always feel free to come and ask me. And even after, like, you aren't a teen anymore or start going to college or whatever your next plan is, don't be afraid to contact me. I am more than happy to answer your questions still. We even have an adult writers club, so you can start coming to the adult writers club once you transition out of it. I'm more than happy to still help you, and know that I want to help you be able to get published and to work on things. Also, if you want to work on promoting yourself on social media because you want to promote your writing more, I would be happy to help you tell you what I learned. Am I good at it? No. Am I learning? Yes. I would also be happy to help you edit your stuff if you want to try to get more short story publications done, because I know that that's really hard and really competitive. So if you want me to edit your stuff to help you get stuff published, I'd be more than happy to help you. For now, I'm going to turn off the video, and then we can just have our nice little free writing time.